The deathcore scene is thriving now more than ever, with bands like Lorna Shore and Slaughter to Prevail going strong and keeping it alive, but it's very different from what it used to be. Whether it's in a good way or not is for you to decide since it's completely subjective, but one thing's for sure, without the initial rise of deathcore, none of that would be possible today. With Myspace and the Vans Warped Tour, the scene was at its best for many years, but as we all know, unfortunately, it wouldn't last, and deathcore went in a very dark place. So I guess the question is, who started it? How did it get so popular? Why did it go away after a while? That's what we're gonna find out today. So my friend, as usual, take a cup of coffee, a cigarette, red velvet cake, whatever you feel like, as we dive into the rise and fall of deathcore. Real quick before starting the video, I just want to say thank you to all my Patreon. Yes, I only have one, but I just started it and I still appreciate the support. Speaking of which, feel free to join our Discord and coming out with us during our live podcast on Twitch every Wednesday. So before diving into the Myspace era, which is obviously by far my favorite era, in case you didn't notice, let's go back to the early days. It basically all started in the late 90s with a band called Antagony. Sure, it was a little rough around the edges, but hey, it was the beginning of deathcore, so pretty cool. And I know a lot of you are gonna tell me that it all started in the 80s with this band or that band. It's fine, feel free to comment, but to me, from what I heard, Antagony is the only one, like the earliest that kind of sounded like deathcore. That being said, with all due respect, Despised Icon is the band who took it to the next level. They perfected the art of blending hardcore and death metal in such a good way that if you listen to certain parts, you could believe it's a hardcore band or a death metal band, depending. A big reason for that is they're doing both vocal styles. Alex is nailing the hardcore tones, while Steve is doing perfect gutturals and pig squeals. But as much as they're considered legends and pioneers, their innovation still didn't make deathcore as popular as it would later become. Back in those days, there was a hype around it, sure, but it was still very controversial. There was a big resistance from the death metal scene. If you look at Despised Icon, especially during those days, they had more of a hardcore tough guy look as opposed to the traditional long hair, beard, and camel short kind of aesthetic. So they were basically treated as outsiders who didn't belong until bands like Job for a Cowboy and Suicide Silence came along. Things really started to turn around when Suicide Silence in 2005 released their self-titled EP. And, of course, Job for a Cowboy, during the same year, officially released the Doom EP. The Doom EP is still looked at as one of the most influential releases of all time, rightfully so, and so both bands really started to get more popular, especially in their local scene. A big reason for it was the insane live performances. What's interesting to me is that they didn't have many hardcore elements, especially if we compare to Despise Icon and early Deathcore, but they had something extremely important in Deathcore: the pig squeals and breakdowns. It sounded more extreme, angry, and chaotic, and it was connecting with a brand new audience, but not exclusively a live audience like most bands at the time. No, a brand new platform was on the rise, a website that would forever change the way artists would get discovered: Myspace. This was the real game changer, my friends. Not only for deathcore, but for the entire music industry. Everyone was only a few clicks away from discovering their new favorite band, connecting with people all over the world. It was revolutionary, it was crazy. Back in those days, if you wanted to see someone, you had to call them on a landline. Just to give you an idea, now we had a custom platform in which you can create your very own website. Bands were announcing tours and their upcoming shows. They had their members section with each role. I really missed that, by the way. The merch they were selling, their sponsors. You could also leave a comment, which was new at the time. We also had something called a top 8, featuring your top friends as a band or as a person, which I'm sure destroyed a lot of friendships all over the world, but that's not the point. And as much as all those features were revolutionary and game changer, the most important one, obviously, was the music player. You could, as a band, release your new songs, your demo, pre-prod, anything, and as a person, you could showcase your favorite songs and, in a way, welcome people into your world. It was amazing. MySpace wasn't only an outlet to express who you are as a person, it was a community, a movement, a way for you to create a career without having to rely on big companies anymore. Anyone with Audacity and Fruity Loop Studios could become the next big thing. Speaking of which, we ended up having some amazing experimental cyber grind projects like We Came With Broken Teeth, which was my personal favorite. And as MySpace was growing and getting more popular, on the other side, YouTube started to be a thing. Now, call me lazy if you want, but there's no way I'm explaining to you what YouTube is. I mean, you're on it right now. The reason why I'm mentioning YouTube is because, as we all know, in order to get popular all around the world, you need a viral moment. Entombment of a Machine by Job for a Cowboy wasn't only an amazing top-tier deathcore song, it was a statement in the metal community. It basically told the entire world that a brand new sound, a new energy, a new take on what was considered heavy was coming in the scene. So many bands were influenced and inspired by that. They were trying to create their own version of it, if you will. And talking about creating your own version, let's go back to 2006 when some high school kids from the UK had the idea of mixing at the gate riffs with heavy breakdowns. With their emo look and Ollie Sykes fronting the band, Bring Me the Horizon not only created an amazing deathcore album, but they connected with a brand new audience, the scene kids. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because while bands like Job for a Cowboy and Suicide Silence were heavily influenced by the death metal scene, on the other side, emo kids who were into bands like Alesana and Bless the Fall were also seeking heavier music at the time. And so, Bring Me the Horizon basically gave them the perfect record to make the transition, if you will. The thing is, as we all know, nothing gets viral without receiving a big amount of hate, and as you probably guessed, The death metal community wasn't really on board with dudes playing breakdowns, wearing skinny jeans, and playing death metal riffs. They were considered a joke, an intruder in their scenes, and gatekeepers were not having it.
Now, deathcore is fucking horrible. It's not good music. It's just a ripoff, a fucking ripoff of death metal with breakdowns and simplistic riffs that sound like shit. Have you ever heard of I Wrestled the Bear once, and Whitechapel, and all that fucking shit? It's not even riffs, it's just scratching on the guitar like and it's fucking pig squeals. Why do you want to fucking sound like a pig? That's not good vocals.
The irony is that even though the death metal community kept calling deathcore a joke, they were still constantly talking about it and, in a way, contributing to its popularity at the time, funny enough. But while we're here, I really have to mention, before people come after me, we had other bands doing the at the gate riff styles. I mean, As Blood Runs Black, All Shall Perish, both legendary and pioneers in that specific deathcore style. But since every scene needs an icon, a rock star representing it, Ollie Sykes was clearly the perfect candidate. Until, in 2007, Suicide Silence released an album that would revolutionize the entire deathcore scene, The Cleansing. Suicide Silence became the #1 deathcore band in the world. Mitch Schlucker became the face of deathcore and still is, in my opinion. But beyond that, it became the official sound of deathcore in a way. Every single band wanted to sound like that. It was the new definition of deathcore almost, you know? It was the official rise of deathcore. It was undeniable, even if the labels and the big companies at first were hesitant and kind of not sure because of all the controversy behind it. They had no choice at this point. It was getting more popular by the day. I mean, with the rise of Suicide Silence came the rise of Whitechapel, Carnifex, Winds of Plague, Chelsea Grin, Oceano, and of course, the Spice Icon. We also had incredible bands that wouldn't be considered deathcore, but still part of the same scene, like Immure, Val of Maya, Attila. Having so many icons in the scene made it like 10 times bigger. I mean, Phil Bozeman, Alex Kohler, Adam Warren, Frankie Palmieri, Scott Ian Lewis. I mean, I couldn't name so many others, but I'm sure you get the picture. The thing is, with Myspace and the Vents Warped Tour, it really became one big scene, with Bring Me the Horizon dropping a metalcore album right after releasing a deathcore album. It really blended all together, which was great, because you would see bands like Asking Exandria touring with Suicide Silence, even the crabcore bands like Attack Attack or the mainstream bands like A Day to Remember would all be considered part of the same scene. Don't get me wrong, deathcore was still its very own thing, and a lot of fans were exclusively listening to deathcore bands, but I'm just giving you the context because it was a special moment in time. Metalcore and deathcore being connected in that way, it was just incredible. And a big part of it was also the fact that each band really sounded unique. Not to say that it's not the case anymore, but I feel like it was a special time. Another thing that contributed a lot to the deathcore and metalcore popularity was the iconic, edgy lyrics printed on the merch. We also had amazing death metal bands that were so involved and influential in the scene that they were considered deathcore almost. A good example of that would be the Black Dahlia Murder. Rest in peace, Trevor Sternad, legend. Another good example of that would be Waking the Cadaver, a band that I'm still, to this day, very obsessed with. By the way, Dunn, the vocalist, became a good friend of mine. He's one of the best guys I've ever met. I would also include Annotations of an Autopsy. I know they're technically deathcore, but their early sound to me was really death metal. Amazing band, and in case you didn't know, around 2011, they kind of became a beatdown deathcore band. Which brings me to one of the most important part of this video, the underground deathcore scene. Now, obviously, I cannot name all the bands, but here are a few examples. We Are the End. Yeah, you looked into my eyes. And Hell Followed It. Abacab. Elysia. King Conquer. Jerome. And my personal favorite, Suffocate. Suffocate actually got pretty big when they released the iconic Not the Fallen video, with Ricky Hoover himself getting more and more popular, but the band somehow kind of always stayed underground. For years, deathcore was thriving, it was in such a good place. People all over the world were mushing, getting tattoos, stretching their ears, honoring the music they loved, you know? I think we all remember the breakdown compilations on YouTube. Top soul-crushing breakdowns that are gonna make you fall off your chair or something like that. That's also kind of how we discovered a lot of those bands during that era. So yeah, all in all, the Myspace deathcore era was probably the best era of my life, if I'm honest. I'm always going to be obsessed with it, but unfortunately, it wouldn't last. The first step into the downfall, Myspace itself dying around 2011. You see, during that era, Facebook was getting more and more popular. You would even see some bands mentioning their Facebook on their Myspace profile, and on top of that, around, I think it was 2010, maybe beginning of 2011, Myspace decided to change its interface. Like, it was a different layout, and believe me, it was for the worst. Over time, the transition from Myspace to Facebook became more and more clear, and it was the logical thing to do for the bands and for people in general. I get that, but it was such a downgrade. I mean, we went from a creative custom platform full of amazing features to a bland, boring app showcasing likes and posts. Don't get me wrong, I think Facebook was a great way for people to connect and share content, but for bands and artists, it was just horrible, and still is, by the way. Thanks a lot, Mark, I guess. Now I really miss Tom. Then, right after the transition, in November 2012, as we all know, Mitch Locker tragically passed away, and he was such an important part of the scene, such an icon and an influence for a whole generation that when he passed away, Deathcore literally died at the same time. Not too long after that, Ricky Hoover decided to leave Suffocate, which of course didn't have as much of an impact as Mitch Locker passing away, but it still meant that we lost an icon in another way, so the snowball effect of all those things kind of led us to, in my opinion, the worst era. It was so weird. I mean, a lot of bands would change their sound for gent or straight up death metal, losing the entire appeal of deathcore itself. I mean, no crazy breakdowns, no samples, no experimental parts, you know, they all went serious and kind of just a different approach. It didn't feel the same at all. In other words, instead of being raw and surprising, it was overproduced and boring. Almost felt like they all recorded at the same studio. And I'm not saying we didn't get any good music. I mean, when Dart is Murder dropped Ring of Darkness. And while we're talking about Dart is Murder, I'm just gonna say it, to me, their very first EP is still the best thing they ever released. Then for a while we had Tumblr and blogs like Total Deathcore who did their best to keep the scene alive, which a couple of years later led us to the Beatdown era. I have to admit, it was unexpected and extremely heavy. But aside from Beatdown, we also had amazing deathcore bands keeping it alive, like Angel Maker, Lorna Shore, Infant Annihilator. They all really kept the scene alive, and we have to give credits to bands like Whitechapel, Suicide Silence, Carnifex that despite what was happening at the time through the years, they never gave up, and for that, they deserve all the respect in the world. To be honest, I think what was happening was also that people kind of grew out of it. After all, it was a phase for a lot of deathcore fans around the world, and a lot of people just moved on, I guess. But this wouldn't be the end, because as we all know, years later, Lorna Shore would literally bring back deathcore from the dead. It's such a different version of deathcore though, right? I mean, we're kind of far from this. And I'm not saying it's bad at all. I mean, those bands are really talented. Shadow of Intent, Brain of Sacrifice, all those bands are insane. But for those who miss the OG Myspace deathcore sound, there's an incredible Myspace revival going on, and it's like, they're younger for the most part, but they so get it. It's like they perfected the art of studying MySpace or something. It's insane. And obviously, I wish I could include all of them and show them all to you, maybe for another video. But for now, here are some examples. Oh, and by the way, that's kind of what I'm doing with my own deathcore project, CURSEEATER. Deathcore is in such a good place right now. I know I keep saying that I prefer the old school, raw, OG sound, but to be honest, I'm really glad we have both. Everything is just bigger and those bands are thriving and it's great. It doesn't need to be old school deathcore versus modern deathcore or something. It's just cool to have those conversations, right? But it's in a good place. It's really wholesome. Enough with my opinions. I want to know yours. Let me know how you feel about it. Maybe share your favorite memories or anything, really. It's so cool to have these conversations, and yeah, it was a very fun video for me to make. I know it's a bit different, but with the new year and all that, I wanted to explore a bit more, talk about specific topics instead of just telling you guys band stories. Don't get me wrong, I'll still do it, obviously, I'm enjoying it a lot, but videos like this one was, I don't know, I want to make more like this, so let me know if it's something you'd like. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my Patreon because I'm gonna start doing some really cool stuff with it. Again, feel free to join our Discord, the link is in the description, and feel free to hang out with us during our live Deathcore podcast every week. Now, finally, I'm gonna stop talking. I'll see you in the next one.